This is your faithful host, James, and I'm delighted to have my returning guest in the series of podcasts we are doing, Mr. Gerald R. Clark. And of course, you can check out Gerald's website, geraldclark77.com, to follow today's author. Don't forget to check out his blog while you're there. Some really interesting articles on what we're going to talk about today, and regularly updated as well. Gerald is a minefield of information and knowledge on what the subject matter we're going to talk about today. Of course, we are talking about the Anunnaki and the legacy that's been left to us by them. Gerald's got 2 books, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, Mankind's Forgotten, Creators, Enslavers, Destroyers of the New World Order, and of course there is 7th Planet, Mercury Rising. That's his latest book. And it's a lot of what we're focusing on in these series of podcasts. Of course, we're getting much more into the book and the background information too. And it's, for me, I listen to the shows just before I do the next one, because I have to, and it's great for me, because the benefit is that this information is timeless, this material is timeless. It's been timeless since it was given to us 5,000 years ago. 6,000 years ago or beyond, and it's timeless now. It's the same information. It doesn't go out of date. There is no sell-by date on this information, and I think that's the most important stuff to mention. So, without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi, Gerald. Very welcome back to the show.
Hey, my Irish brother James. It's always good to be back, and like you, I go back and listen to the shows just to get back on the same sheet of music where we left off, and it does require more work, but I think because of us doing that, it's having the effect that we both wanted.
Yeah, and like I say, Gerald, whether you read the book or listen to the audiobook or you listen to the shows, there's so much information in there. You couldn't possibly take it all in at once anyway. And to take it in again, Gerald, you get a different level or a different layer. There's just so much in there. I mean, we're talking some heavy subjects.
Just prepping for this show, I picked up a couple things that I really didn't comment on in the book that just filled in another layer for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whether you're talking about monuments, or whether you're talking about civilizations, or whether you're talking about the reasons why, whether being genetically altered or spiritual ascension or lost knowledge. I mean, it's all in here, Gerald, and it's all there, and it's all tangible. But you're going to have an intelligent mind to get through some of this material, and that's what I love what we're doing, Gerald. We're doing it in a productive, intelligent manner and a good dialogue too. So I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to talk more on the Emerald Tablets. We're going to get into some of this stuff, Gerald. Let's launch into it. I mean, let's talk about avatars, Gerald, because this is kind of what we're going to focus on a bit today. Everyone's familiar with the Avatar movie. I mean, I actually had Michael Cremo on the show a long time ago, and he had mentioned the analogy of the Avatar. He's coming from the Krishna perspective, of course, and ascension, but he used the Avatar analogy that is so close to the truth we just don't even realize it. We're being given this in the movies and we don't even realize it, how close to the truth this is. You feel the same, Gerald?
Well,
you feel the same that Avatar movie is just right on par with what's possible?
Well, there's been a couple of them. I think the one that connects with me even more is the Matrix movie, how the people are used as avatars in there. Mm-hmm. And I think it predates the movie Avatar by quite a bit. And speaking of dating of the term, the fact that the term avatar shows up in the Emerald Tablets, and assuming that they're as old as he says they are, and we talked about that they were 50,000 years old when he left the Atlantis to go to the land of Chem, or Egypt. So using that term way back, in time is an amazing concept, and busting the holographic simulator wide open.
Oh, sure. We're going to focus on tablets 2 and 3 today, and we'll play these at the end of our segments as well, so that people can get familiar with actually what we're talking about. But yeah, the Matrix, Gerald, I actually covered that on a show last week before I was traveling. From cinema symbolism actually was what we were focusing on, and all the symbolism that's incorporated into that movie. It's mind blowing when you analyze it.
I actually, watching it recently, I'd seen it a long time ago, and I just watched it again with Krista recently, and the idea of Avatar now you compare the way that the avatars where the protagonist had to use a telephone line to go back and forth from this dimensional reality, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas these agents could do it at will with any body they wanted. Did you notice that? Mm-hmm. They could take over the helicopter pilot. They could take over the bum that was in the alleyway. Mm-hmm. So really the avatar kind of capabilities that Thoth talks about in the second tablet is more like what the agents were doing. So at the beginning he talks about that they were observing mankind in this tablet and realizing how enslaved they were. And we talk about the method of enslavement, and he talks about the enslavement force coming from beyond. And that, I believe, is the same false Merkaba field that Drunvalo talked about that was holding everybody in a false state of illusion. Okay? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden they're talking, Thoth is introducing the idea of these partners that are going to come with him, these agents, if you will, of light that are going to assist him. And he says there's 32 of them. And interestingly enough, when you include him in that, you end up with 33. Well, that's a pretty astounding Masonic number that you see on the temple. It's their highest degree, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I also noticed that in Atlantis they have their twin pillars that we talked about earlier, built out of orichalcum, that were decorating Poseidon's temple, because that was Poseidon's kingdom, right?
Sure.
And we knew that Ningshita Thoth was Enki's son, so keeping that in mind when he refers to his father as various names, it's interesting how he keeps this Chinese wall between him and who his dad really is. I'm not sure why. Anyway, the point is, right in the beginning of the tablet, they introduced the idea of an avatar, because they describe their capabilities of being able to be in the halls of Amente. They renew their original body, but from there they can travel, occupy the bodies of seekers, in essence, those that are on a path to try to wake up out of darkness, is how they describe it later. And they influence them to find the path that leads to the full activation of their light body, so they can be one of them. Ultimately, that's what they're doing. Okay, this is what they were doing in the mystery schools. Okay, so here they are talking about all 32 of them having a particular seat, a permanent seat in the halls of Amente, where they're renewing their bodies just like Thoth is. And it's interesting because this flower of life symbol is the key to them renewing their life energy that's related to their chakras. So I sent you a document to show the flower of life.
Oh yeah.
And for those who don't know it, it was a symbol that Drunvalo got turned on to from a photograph he had taken in Egypt, and then they found it in other places in the world, started connecting the dots to who the symbol came from. It turned out to be from Thoth. And he describes being illuminated about that symbol that led to sacred geometry, the measurement of the Vesica Pisces, and in general, this symbol encapsulates the chakras and the Kabbalah. So it's a very interesting symbol. And there was something else I was going to tell you about. Well, so the symbol represents the tree of life, which you see in the Sumerian edifice, is one you showed me from the Library of Ashurbanipal, where they're standing either side of the tree of life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it has the tree, and then it has a seed, and then then a flower, and then a seed. And then it represents a continuous law of creation, just like was encapsulated in the tarot card. That was the Egyptian law of continuous creation that was encoded in those cards. It's a much deeper encoding beyond reading it as a card.
Sure.
Okay. So the idea of avatars gets introduced very early in the tablet, and he's talking about, in order for them to sustain their life, that they've got to. He blasts a very large underground facility where the halls of Amente are located, and connects it with and apparently it went from there all the way underground to somehow an underground city that was also accessible beneath Atlantis, if you read the text. So somehow these original lords of the nine cycles that he refers to them later have occupied this place along with these 32 beings that he brought that sound like they were from Arulu. Okay, because he calls that his ancient home, and then he talks about them being his brothers, essentially, you know, his same akin as he is. So he's brought them from what sounds like Arulu, which, according to a chart we're going to look at later, is on the 6th dimension, down to the 3rd dimension here to wake us up. And he's watching this war and the strife, blah, blah. And this goes all the way back to the end of World War II. And I didn't mean to surprise you with that, but this version of the enslavement that's talked about also has to do with essentially watching us use very complex weapons to destroy each other. And this actually caught the attention of the being referred to as the master in the dialogue and the diary from Admiral Byrd. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was very, very telling that he was traveling in an aircraft heading toward the North Pole. He lost control of his aircraft because his navigation equipment failed, got lost, couldn't communicate back with the base. And next thing you know, he's over some valley with mammoths in it. It's warm. It's about 70 degrees. And he's like, wait, everything was ice covered just a little while ago. Where'd this come from? And about that time, he has an encounter with a couple of winged discs that end up at either side of him to escort him down to have an encounter with this being in this underground base. So keep that in mind as you're talking about now Thoth blasting an underground space, which apparently the halls of Amenti and this area that he's talking about that he commemorates with the Giza pyramid and the Sphinx, which is only a small artifact according to him on the surface to give you a location marker for the city underground, which apparently fills the entire Nile Valley, according to Jim Hertog.
Wow. So
he blasts this underground space so he can have access to the flower of life and renew his body just like they do. And there's a point where he's talking about concentrating galactic energy using crystals on the opening to this underground facility. And I thought this was really a nice lead-in for you to talk about some of the crystals and acoustics, or the acoustic healing and how that relates to sexagesimal number systems, if you're in a place to talk about it.
Sure. Well, crystal technology, it's something I've dabbled in. Actually, I was, funny you mentioned it. Let's go back to the library of Ashurbanipal. I was there the weekend for Annunaki TV doing some stuff. It's up there. If people want to search the YouTube channel, you can actually watch the video loop that I put up there. And my other half was actually meditating at that flower of life, the tree of life there, Gerald, and she was like, she was really overpowered with the meditation she was doing there. It was pretty quiet in the museum, and we were lucky. But I actually had noticed, well, my other half had noticed and pointed out to me that some of these winged bulls, Gerald, at the other end of the library of Ashurbanipal are so tarnished. They look like they're like an off brown or a creamy brown. But they're actually made out of crystal, Gerald. They're actually fully solid pieces of crystal, which I never even noticed before. But to the ancient Egyptians and to the ancient Sumerians, they were masters of working with crystal, Gerald. From my master's degree in research science and society, I studied the cylinder cells, and a lot of them are made out of unusual crystals. I actually have a video I just shot the weekend, Gerald, of a cylinder seal made out of rock crystal, 9 out of 10 on the hardness Moscow, and it's got a hole drilled through the center of it, a perfect cylinder, hole drilled through the center and carved. For me, it's one of the most important cylinder seals we have, because it's the hardest one we have, basically in engineering sense. But then you also have the layered lens, as it's called, or the Nineveh lens. Henry Austin Layard found it at Nineveh. So some people call it the Nineveh lens, and some people call it the Layard lens. But again, it's got this biconvex curvature on it that would correct eyesight, or at least be an optical lens for perhaps a telescope or some sort of a corrective lens. Maybe you'd have to put it with another one to make something of an optical telescope, of course. But this has a beautiful curvature. And what I find so fascinating with this crystal lens technology which is on display in the British Museum. I'll have that up as well. Hopefully, and this is what I love going to the museums. I keep going back and finding stuff in these museums. There's so much in them. But this layered lens, Gerald, I mean, the thing that makes you mind melt is that the tool to carve it or make it would have been more complex than the finished product. Because, and tools normally are, Gerald. I mean, you need something like a toroidal shape, a donut-shaped tool to carve that curvature of that lens. And then to have something that can carve rock crystal, well, it needs to be at least 9 or 10 on the Mohs scale. So therefore, it's even a more complex shape than the one that was used to make it. It's totally mind blowing, and the use of ancient knowledge of crystals, of course, the megalithic stuff as well. Not as much as some of the Egyptian stuff or some of the Sumerian stuff. But this use of crystals goes back a long, long way, Gerald, and it's in some circumstances, like I just pointed out, incredibly sophisticated, high technology in an engineering sense. Yeah. In an engineering sense, not.
Well, I wanted to touch a little bit more on that because it ties together these two stories. The diary from Admiral Byrd, and I'm going to send a link to that. I mean, we might put it somewhere in the description for the show, where he's talking about a force field that not only brings his plane down while his engines are off, that's crazy, and barely, sets him down very lightly, but he also describes a force field that surrounds the entrance to the place. Well, here in the tablet, and he calls the guy the master, okay? So what I'm trying to tell you is that I believe the master he encountered is using the exact same technology and gives you the same message later in tablet number 12 as what Admiral brought in 1945. I think that's pretty crazy. So part of what he said was that they were concentrating this energy on the portal to the Giza pyramids leading into the halls of Amenti to keep the dark forces out. So he was creating a force field, okay? Well, I just sent you also a link that Boeing just announced that they were able to get a patent to do this exact same thing. Now, their patent on their force field that they built, it's kind of not quite what Star Wars had in mind, but it's designed to keep the pressure wave from an exploding missile that might be causing an EMP or something like that, from those pressure waves punching through an area that's kind of an invisible force shield that they're generating for similar purposes. So, and whether it could keep the missile out or is not known, but it looks like it could keep the pressure wave that the missile creates out. So basically, to cancel a pressure wave, you got to sense it and then send it actually the opposite, right? So that's essentially what they're probably doing. But they got a patent for it, and I haven't read it, but I thought it was very interesting timing that they did that.
I've read the articles and about the Boeing scientists, Gerald. They're incredibly interesting. Just for the listeners, it's not an impenetrable force field. However, it is designed to at least limit or reduce the force of destructive explosions or shock waves and stuff like that. But it's going in the right direction, Gerald. The technology, it will head there if they could master. Yeah, if they could master. But it's like everything, Gerald, in engineering or science. If you start the process, you will eventually master it to at least some high level. And that's going to take trial and error. It's like all engineering and all science. But incredibly interesting, this force field technology, Gerald.
Well, also this ability to concentrate galactic energy onto a crystal. Maybe they're using a focusing lens to use sunlight to light up a crystal. I'm not quite sure, but I was going to tell you when I was a VP of Engineering at LightPoint, we'd go back and forth to Dresden, Germany, where we set up our manufacturing facility. And our East German team there in Dresden, our facility, had a very close relationship with the Zeiss Optics folk out of Russia and East Germany. So in the free space optics business that we were doing, we were coupling a fiber from vertical cavity surface emitting lasers that were going into a multimode fiber and then sending that through a focusing lens so you could send this infrared beam of laser beam over the air. So the idea of it concentrating the energy, the dispersion issues you got to deal with, I find it very interesting that if you think about the nature of various crystals, and you're talking about the platonic solids put together in using some cymatic vibration, right? Like, and then creating a very close bond that then is sensitive to a certain frequency or energy. And this was real popular in the alternative human energy field, like Reiki and stone healing using crystals. And there's a whole crystal therapy book that tells you which chakra and which crystal to use so they would use them to mess with the human energy ganglia as well. And so here the first alchemist, Thoth, is talking about how he uses crystals for energy generation, for protective shields, and apparently they were using it for remote controlling aircraft right out of the sky too. According to Admiral Byrd.
You know, we have, and I mentioned this before in a few shows of my own and stuff, Gerald, and probably you as well, but the Tuatha De Danann, the Irish mythological gods, or semi-divine beings, they had force fields. This is in our literature, Gerald. This is in our, at least the first written accounts we have are 7th century Gaelic books wrote in Irish by monks. But the Celts were going back to the time of 1500 BC when they inherited the megalithic mounds of the Tuatha De Danann. And they talk about these guys having a magic force field. That's what the words translates as. It's like 7th century AD science fiction. But it wasn't done in the 7th century. It was only written down. They were old Irish tales that were written down. But they talk about the Celts having a magic, an iron sword that was able to breach the magic force field, and somehow the iron content, and nobody had iron until the Celts came with their iron sword, and they had a special sword with them, and it was only for that they were able to do something and breach their force field with the use of iron, and that's all in 7th century AD books, Gerald, which is mind blowing.
It is mind blowing because. Let's take it to the next level with this flower of life crystal that he's talks about that he's got set up in the halls of Amente. Mm-hmm. So he's got these 32 other beings that take an original body. They're not trading bodies, and they're living with that body in perpetuity because they've been able to expose themselves to the radiating energy that's coming off this crystal that he calls the flower of life. So here's another discussion of this crystal that's like the Celtic legend you're talking about. This energy field is not to keep them out, but it's actually to regenerate their bodies. So instead of, consuming Starfire gold and activating it like some of the other ones were doing it, they're getting it directly off this flower of life symbol. And this is the same place he's got to go every 100 years out of 1,000 to renew his body. Because you remember the last tablet, I believe it's the last one, where he said, he's going to have to leave and go to this underground chamber to renew his body. So he's going to be out of the loop for 100 years, even though he can roam around and be an avatar. Okay, so he can still. And the crazy thing about it is, it looks like he can be an avatar in more than one body at once. Now think about how hard that must be.
Gerald, we're talking about Thoth the Atlantean here. And the Halls of Amente, Emerald Tablet 2, and that. And, I remember a long time ago, Gerald, I would hear people talk about mostly channeling. I never even kind of checked their source of where they got this from, and we're probably going to jump ahead here a bit, but they talked about Atlantis being destroyed and an explosion and abuse of crystal technology, and I was like, this is all hippy dippy, forget about this. Where's your source material on this? And I was like, I'm very left-brained, I'm very engineering, and I'm like, and I'd switch it off, that part of me, like, because I like a bit of mystery, but if I need to see some meat and potatoes too, but I don't scare away from that anymore, Joe, because this makes sense to me. This makes sense to me that Atlantis may have fallen.
That chart I sent you from the resonant field imaging last time, I scanned it and sent it to you. So what you could do is you could take if you just wanted to do the chakras, you just measure the ones that are right up the middle, right? But you could measure all over the body and look at what kind of complex fields are going on. Cause you gotta think about the superposition principle when you've got multiple nodes that are resonating with their various frequencies. What happens when they all synchronize, And you think about a crystal as well. You can expose it to white light, and it'll some quick crystals like quartz will show you the separation of light into the 7 visible colors of the rainbow. Well, so now imagine, when you're not splitting it up, you've got white light that's mixing all those colors together. That's kind of the superposition principle, if you will. Well, it's the same thing that's happening in your body. So when these chakras are, I don't know, when they're all generating the right kind of light, it'll mix all together at the right nodal amplitudes. Hopefully, it's aggregating, not troughs hitting peaks and producing flat lines. But if they're in coherence, phase coherence, the amplitudes will add. Okay, and then all of a sudden you've got this aggregation of the superposition principle of this light coming off your ganglia, just like a crystal shows when it separates white light. So, in other words, those chakras are designed to take you back to a place where you essentially are the most coincident with a light being, just like the tablet says. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting reverse process, though.
Sure. You know, you mentioned something very important there, Gerald, and that's this living in the force field and generating the force field for the benefit of these avatars, for the benefit of this ascension, for the benefit of this spiritual well-being, the well-being of the body in a physical sense. And, you know, the warmongers in us always think, oh, well, force fields, you know, it's meant to keep people out, and it's not that. It's something totally different, Gerald. Like you just mentioned.
Well, these guys didn't have to have a spike stuck in the back of their head like they did in Avatar and also in the Matrix, right? They're just being the human antennas they took on avatar bodies to replicate, and they're receiving this energy through their chakras, essentially.
You know,
through their meat modem.
Sure. You know, the angle of the Great Pyramid is at a very specific angle. As you know, it's not. Most people just think it's a 45. It's halfway point, but it's not. It's at 5150, 51 degrees 51 seconds. But this special angle is the best angle for reflecting radar. It's also got these very small, narrow chambers, shafts as they're called. And they're at a very special diameter of 35 centimeters, which is the exact angle for microwaves. And I think that these things were probably collecting the microwave background energy from, you know, just the space, the galactic. And I think it was, you know, been harnessing this to activate crystal technology inside, sound chambers, all sorts of weird. It's an acoustically tuned monument. I think this thing was emitting a frequency at the top of it, Gerald. And this was probably a force field generating. Maybe these guys were just living around the Giza Plateau. And I've personally been there on the Giza Plateau. I have a chunk of it. Actually, the whole of some of the Giza Plateau is on a crystal bed, Gerald. It's a natural crystal layer. I have a chunk of it in front of me here on the room, like. And
I've read quite a bit of theories about the angles of those shafts, what they were pointing at, what was going on in the Queen's chamber relative to hydrogen ions being mixed with microwave energy to generate, or water being mixed in a certain with another element, so that they were generating hydrogen that they were using power, and the idea of using the acoustic chambers with multiple crystals that were at various harmonics as either communication or energy generation and ascension. Thoth tells us that later in the tablets that, you know, if you lay down in here and blah blah blah, I'll have an encounter with you and I'll be and I'll wake you up in this chamber. So it was always a temple primarily for ascension, and I think it had many other advanced energy interactions with matter, demonstrations of its magic science that we both are alluding to.
Sure. And to add to that, there's a great book called Seeds of Plenty. And it's about putting seeds at ancient temples and pyramids in particular. Some are activated and some aren't. Some are still activated today. And you can go and you can measure the electromagnetic energy of the Earth coming online at its biggest change during the day at about 4 a.m. It's 3:37 a.m. But as a result, when you put seeds there, they harness the energy of the pyramid. And when you plant those seeds, the ones that were, and you take ones that aren't near a pyramid and you put ones on a pyramid, the ones that have been on the pyramid have a 30% higher yield, proven in the lab time and time again. And I just can't help think that it's you know, when this thing was activated and fully functional, you know, I think the health and the well-being of everybody around that Giza Plateau and around this energy field, this force field, that would have been naturally generating, which, by the way, happens off all high streets. The Empire State Building has its own weather system at the top of it, and all skyscrapers do. There's a natural energy field around all structures. It's just the more crystal in it, or the more metal in it, the more it's going to affect, and the taller the object, or the shape or the geometry of the object. So this isn't new agey, or this isn't alternative science.
No,
this is mainstream.
You're just describing the basic understanding of a lightning rod. If you've got a rod stick around and you stick it up just high enough, those positive electrons are emanating out, attracting the negative electrons that are caught in the capacitive moisture of a cloud. So you take a tall antenna and you have part of it touching the ground and stick it up in the air, you're going to have a difference in electrical potential like a battery. So there's energy there, and this is the same kind of thing that Tesla noted as well.
Another thing I looked at as well, Gerald, and I'm kind of going off topic, but I like this force field business because it just makes so much sense to me now, Gerald, and I know that there's a high magnesium content on those casing stones as well, and there's a high calcium content for the limestone as well, for the core masonry of the Great Pyramid. The casing stones a high magnesium content. Did they choose that directly, and would it act like a capacitor or a battery? I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on with crystals and metallic contents in the stone.
Well, just another point to that is, recall when Thoth showed up in the last tablet, and everybody came out to attack him with the bludgeons and the spears, and he used a crystal weapon of some sort to freeze him in place, the stones of the mountain, right? So he's using some energy devices that are even able to incapacitate a human without hurting them, and I find that pretty interesting.
That's incredible. It's incredible.
But so later in Tablet 2, it starts talking about almost these tenets for living right, but before he gets to that, he kind of gives a clue about the avatars that they decide to interact with that don't know that they're actually taking on bodies of men. They look like men, but they're actually, these advanced light beings that are masters of the cycle. So these 32 avatars have certain capabilities, probably like Thoth. But then, when we'll get to it in the next tablet, he starts talking about the cycle controllers that also share the halls of Amente with these other 32. So you kind of get a full layout of the big dogs that are in there and who they are. So one of the key things that comes out that they're talking about them being avatars and their mission of coming here to wake up the enslaved and turn them back on to being the light beings that they are designed to be, is an instance from the creator of all. Okay, that's what they're referring to. So one of the things that they say is that the ones that grow out of darkness are the chosen for help along the way. Now, and if they achieve their goal, whatever it is along the way is, mastering the external and then becoming, like, going down the path Thoth did, they said, they give them a new title and they call them a Master of Life. And that makes them ready for contact with, the Infinite One. It's basically what it allows. It gives them a new kind of ascended status where they can have higher contact with, beings that are more, I don't know, over the striving against their brother, and they're more about elevation of consciousness and living a spiritual life, right? So these are the more ascended beings. So basically he's saying that that's the status that we can achieve in life if we're striving, the ones that are making progress out of growing out of darkness. They're not saying you've arrived. They're saying you're fighting the heroic fight to transform darkness. So, well, if they see you doing that, they're going to intercede and help you, is what I'm telling you. That's what he's saying here. And I think I've seen that in my path. I think you've seen that in your path, haven't you?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I think everybody who's experienced that realizes there's some force there that will facilitate you doing the right thing if that's what you've chosen to do. And that usually means standing up to darkness of some sort. Anyway, so I thought that was a really interesting thing to talk about as the end goal. You know, he tells us we're going to have darkness poured on our path and a it. So, and the closer you get, this is the trippy part. Whenever you get to a stage where you've gotten to this spiritual goal achieved, right at that point, and very shortly thereafter, you're going to get darkness poured on you. So it's going to shut that down and cause you to have to keep this transmuting process going. It's a whole lifetime thing. And there are you know, who knows how many levels of consciousness there are. But just because you accomplish a spiritual goal, it's not time to gloat around and be happy, because you better put your full armor on, because you're about to go to the next level again. So it just keeps repeating like that. So that's been my experience as well. And Krista's too. We were talking about that today, how funny that is when you get to this place where you're just singing, oh, you've landed in utopia, and then here comes the next thing. So you don't get to experience it for very long. So the time must be short to get to a higher place where they want us to be. Hey, one other thing I was going to say. So the twin pillars of Atlantis is kind of representative of the number 11, right? And we'll see later that there's these three aspects of the creator of all that just show up over and over and over again. I think we already did that, didn't we? No, we're going to do it. So if you take 3 times 11, you end up with 33. I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, the numerology is incredibly important, Gerald. It's always the same numbers. It's 7, 12, 33. You know, these numbers just
22. Yeah. Well, it turns out I went and looked that up. We were going to do that on a show. We talked about like the first one doing numerology and what was important about number 11 and 22 and 33. And I sent you a link on that, but I remembered 33 being the master's number. Well, now all of a sudden you see this term, the master, show up in Admiral Byrd's dialogue, and he gets called that. Oh, so you end up becoming a master of life. So this term master is very important, and it has a lot to do with a term that's used for thought over and over.
Wow, it's incredible. It's incredibly profound knowledge of ascension and incarnation or reincarnation, whichever way you want to look at it, Gerald. You know, and just for people out there, Gerald, I mean, I always like to throw in a bit of science. There's, you know, I've looked into from a scientific perspective, the evidence for incarnation, or reincarnation even. And there's a lot there. There's more there than people actually realize. I think the term is xenoglossy. That's Xeno glossy. Xenoglossy is basically when people are able to speak a language that they've never heard before in their normal state. And there's example of, I think the best example is of 2 kids born in New York twins speaking Aramaic to each other, having dead language, having no actual contact with anybody who speaks Aramaic. Incredibly bizarre, Gerald, you know, that this goes on and gets no attention, you know, it gets no attention. So I just want to put that stuff in there, Gerald, because it's important so people don't think we're just getting, you know, so excited about some tablets where there's no proof of this. There is proof of incarnation and reincarnation, and you know, look at the Dalai Lama. When he gets chosen, he has to go and pick his previous artifacts where only the monks know. Incredibly unique situation where they reincarnate. The Dalai Lama reincarnates each time, and he gets to choose his previous objects, his favorite toys, and only his close associates would know. And they get the kid to choose it, and they take the kid away, and he becomes the next Dalai Lama. Incredibly interesting. Yeah,
well, when we play the tablet later, and I think I've said this multiple times. Of course, I'm an engineer, so I focus on this. But understanding, differentiating the fire from the earth, or where energy meets matter, he tells you that's the secret to understanding this avatar capability, this higher dimensional interchange with these host bodies. I call them meat modems. Okay. And so distinguishing energy from matter is very important. And he talks about that in the tablet as well. So when you do that, all of a sudden you go back to the Adapa tale where, you know, this energy from this one being was taken out and put into the Adapa. Well, that was the creation of the first avatar in front of you, right? And it was documented. So now now you come back to the Emerald Tablets and you see Thoth talking about 32 avatars coming with him, plus he later goes on in the next tablet and talks about these 9 other ones that never even took on a body. They're always in an energy form, constantly roaming, watching the progress of mankind, blah, blah, blah. So we'll jump ahead. We don't want to jump ahead too much, but I want to establish some relational stuff because of the terms he uses here, right? Now, we know that Ningshita is Thoth. We've documented that all the way from Enuma Elish forward to the genetic upgrade account, to Egypt, or to Atlantis.
Sure.
He calls himself Thoth the Atlantean. And then he goes back to Egypt where he becomes the god Thoth there, right? So, he's talking in this tablet 2, about the dweller of the Atlantis temple. Well, we know that's Enki. That's Poseidon. That's his dad. So, why he doesn't call him dad is quite interesting to me, but he kind of builds this little Chinese wall. And he actually gives him another name and tells him he's the son of Thothmi. So it's like this derived name Thoth came from his father, and he's telling you another name for Enki that I didn't even know. So anyway, a lot of detail is given to us by Plato and Solon and Timaeus about the nature of this Poseidon's Atlantis. Okay, so Thoth was born there, right? So he's later, as he grows into wisdom and he's studying all this ancient knowledge, he talks about being summoned to some ceremony where he was going to be designated one of these masters of life, meaning he could take on a body whenever he wanted, leave the body whenever he wanted, but his energy would be eternal and available to do these missions just like these other 32 were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a ceremony that's going on eventually in Tablet 2, and none other than Poseidon himself shows up, is even more capable than Thoth is, which is even hard to imagine. And the discussion in the tablet where he does the handoff and says, I'm giving you the keys of the kingdom, calls him the son of man, all this kind of stuff, direct analogy to kind of the New Testament teachings about Jesus. It's just mind-blowing. So, next, in this process of getting this capability, this ability to renew his life and his, assigned, function that he's going to do, before he does that, he gets taken to meet this master of darkness, because in order for him to make this soul contract where he's never going to be recycled again, I guess, if you will, he gets summoned by this dweller, who is Poseidon, taken to meet one of the lords of the 9 cycles that get really detailed in the next tablet. But he introduces you to their names in this tablet, and that's Untanas, Huertas, Tieto, Goiana, Huertal, Semveta, and Ardal. Okay, and these guys show up again in Tablet 6. Now, these, just to remind people that are listening, those are the names in ascending order from your root chakra number 1 up to number 7. The beings that are controlling this consciousness level that we experience in the program. Very powerful information. So Thoth is getting taken to meet the one who controls the first chakra, whose function is to veil, in other words, keep man in darkness. That's his job. Think about that. He holds the key to the hidden magic and the halls of the dead, this first one. Untanas, okay? He's your root chakra. And the reason I bring that up in my first book, right toward the end of the book, I went and looked up the Hindu gods that were affiliated with each chakra, and I thought, well, is that just another AKA list of these lords of the 9 cycles for these Hindu gods that are affiliated with the chakras? So the first one was affiliated with Lord Ganesh. The second chakra for Huertas, okay, so that's Untanas, another name for him is Ganesh, possibly. Huertas, Lord Vishun, Chieta, which was the third chakra, would be Mahorura Sattva. The fourth chakra, Goyana, would be Ishhara, okay? And then the fifth chakra, Huertal, according to the Emerald Tablets, is in control of that. He's number 7, okay? He's the 7th sun cycle lord, or some cycle lord. Okay, well that was Sasha Shiva, according to the Hindu god, that controlled that chakra. And then the 6th chakra, Samveta, in the Hindu religion, that was Shakti or Devi. Both of those gods controlled that 6th chakra, that, your third eye. And then the final one, the top one, Ardal, is described as the chief of the lords of the 9 cycles. And in the Hindu religion, that's Lord Shiva. So I thought that was really interesting to say, well, are those AKA list names? Also, I wanted to comment on something that came to me, is that they start with the cycle member of these lords of the 9 cycles from 3 to 9, but they don't tell you about number 1 and 2. Well, and it's getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit, but I think it's worthwhile to think about.
Sure.
Later in the tablets, it describes 14 lower dimensions and 9 parallel dimensions to the Earth. So my supposition is, since those are dimensions that are not accounted for here, that number 1 and number 2 would be assigned to, number 1 would be assigned to the lower dimension. Okay? And then number 2, of the 9 lords that are listed, he would probably get the parallel dimension. I'm just guessing. Okay? But there's a hypothesis for someone to fill in what happened to the, number 1 and 2 and they start off right going. So I think because we're in the 3rd through the 9th Mayan sun, which map to these cycles, I believe, that's why we're only given 3 to 9, which is 7 more chakras. So we started at the 3rd cycle because we're already above the lower dimension and the parallel dimension, or at least a part of it. Or we're the highest point in the 9 parallel dimensions, so we would start at number 3, giving us only 7 more to get to 9. I think that's why they did it. I'm just guessing. It's my hypothesis anyway.
Mm.
Okay, so Thoth gets taken to this hall where he's going to meet Untas, the Dark Lord, and very descriptive encounter. Basically, Enki himself has to be there to light up the chamber so that the darkness is demonstrably more capable of the light. And in this telling, basically Enki tells him, this one is a child of the light, don't touch him anymore, he belongs to us. That's essentially what he did. And the whole telling of it in the tablet's pretty neat. So, after he gets this designation, at this point, he declares what his mission's going to be, which he says he wants to be a teacher of men to raise them to the light. Well, this is exactly what he did in the land of Egypt when he set up the mystery school. So this is the oath he made to his dad right before being sent from there 50,000 years ago over to the land of Cam, where he says he ruled for 16,000 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last time we did that, we said, well, that puts you at 50 minus 16,000 is about 34,000 years. And so we were trying to jive when the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx were built. And that's when I did that little zodiacal update for you and sent it off to you to show, and rewound the zodiacal house back twice using the non-equivalence model. And it should work with the equivalence model too. I gotta check that though. But it landed you right in the house of Leo, which was the lion body that we saw in the Sphinx. And he told you the head on it wasn't a lion, he told you it was his face.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was pretty clear. And so the fact that he says 36,000 years ago he built it, you go to the zodiacal wheel or wind it back and lands in that same house, I think it's right. So it's pretty, it's pretty controversial knowledge to say that, well, here's the proof that the Giza pyramid and the Sphinx were built 36,000 years ago, just like Thoth said, by him, the builder. So there's just 2 corroborating pieces of information.
Incredible stuff, Gerald. Incredible stuff. And of course, you mentioned Poseidon there, and what grabs me when we talk about this stuff, Gerald, is all these different cultures around the world. they're always talking about having gods, and as if that wasn't bad enough, the gods are all very similar in description to each other, for obvious reasons that myself and you know, Gerald, but for the benefit of the audience. So all these figureheads or these gods are all very, very similar in descriptions of who they are and what they do, and even their artifacts that they parade around with and their weapons. But then they all have the sons or daughters that are demigods, and the idea of a demigod lineage popping up in Greek, Norse, Irish. The Shatanta was a demigod from the sky god Anu. A direct relation there.
Adam to Noah.
Sumerian
in Genesis is the same telling. You know, you see the long ages of these demigods until the DNA got dumb or intermixed to the point where their lifespans were shortened. So, you know, closer to the genetic archetype they were, it seems like the longer natural ability they had to have long lives. Now, whether they got to go to these, all of them got to go to these renewal chambers and live for a long time like these ascended masters, I don't think they did.
Yeah. I know, well, obviously in the Sumerian tale we have Adapa and Gilgamesh, for fine examples, but, I mean, this, from what I see, the Chinese records have a demigod lineage as well. Some people in Java and Japan talk about demigods as well. So, this is a global system of practice and knowledge is the point, and it's about ascension. It's about, and like you point out, Gerald, in the previous shows, I mean, it's one thing to adjust the telomeres and the little caps at the end and repair them and stop aging. Well, it's another thing. It's another level above that to be able to jump in and out of bodies as an avatar, Gerald. It's an incredibly jump in sophistication. One is sciencey, and one is spiritual science, if you want to call it that, Gerald. One is just pure science of stopping the physical decay of the genome in the aging process. But this spiritual ascension business, Gerald, this avatar and knowledge. I mean, this is the most prized thing you could ever ascend to in any, pardon the pun, ascend to in any civilization, in any level of technology. I mean, what good is the trappings of a physical technology to you if you're gonna die out as a species? You know, if you're able to master your own incarnation, when you're gonna live forever, it's a timeless thing, and it's kind of what's touched in that movie as well, Jupiter Ascending, you know, which is focusing on a lot of this stuff as well, the aging process and ascending and all that.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, if you go back to Hathor's temple when they were consuming these monoatomic bread cakes made from gold, well, they were doing to prolong their lives and affect their telomeres, which may have come from the heightened electromagnetic conductivity of their electrical body, whether it's their cerebral spinal fluid that now has monoatomic elements in it, so that the electrons zing through there without much impediment. It's not really known, but they were using it not just for prolonging their life, but also for expanding this spiritual experience, this energy retention ability, because it's been reported by a lot of people that, you know, consuming that really magnifies your energy body. So that's why a lot of people use it as well. And that would help you with, I mean, if you had some fluctuations in the gravity field due to an asteroid going by or whatever, maybe you had to have a way to amp up your meat modem energy level so that all your telecommunications and remote sensing and all the other advanced mental functions that you had worked better when you did that. Well, possibly they would use that in supplement with having to take off and go to a chamber for 100 years to completely renew their body. You know, from a cellular level, probably everything got replaced. You know, we know in the human body that happens with food in 3 to 6 months, you know, at a cellular level. So why they had to do it for 100 years is not completely clear to me.
You know,
and
Gerald,
also remember, he talks about sleeping with your head to the north and your head to the south. I think we covered that before, for an hour a day, and almost treating us like a battery relative to the magnetic field. So magnetism is a big part of our experience as well. And he talks about that we talked about that in the construct of man in chapter 3, recall?
You know, Gerald, if we were given, as a species or a civilization, if we were given a spaceship that could travel at the speed of light, it would be, and told to go and conquer the universe, you know, if you didn't have to worry about the vastness of space to travel, we could go in an instant. We couldn't do it. We couldn't do it because we'd have to be able to master electromagnetic energy, and we'd have to be able to master gravity. In a knowledgeable sense, that we wouldn't be able to get off that spaceship onto another planet until we mastered the different gravitational issues, or the lack of gravity, or the lack of gravitation.
It's funny you bring up gravity. It does show up in Tablet 2, I believe it is, where he talks about we couldn't exist unless we had something that we could push against, like a pressure experience. Mm-hmm. Which I found very interesting. And in a couple of shows, I talked about reading a book called The Final Theory by Mark McCutcheon. And his first chapter was what drew me in, and he was talking about nothing but gravity. And I have to say, as a structural integrator for many years, and playing with gravity, relating other people's bodies to gravity, looking at it with a plumb bob, a grid chart with differential scene viewing, like with a movie script or a movie frame, in order to detect the difference. I have the software to do that. So I've looked at the human body relative to gravity a lot, and then trying to understand what this force is that either you're at war with or it's helping your energy body. There's no in between. Okay, there's hardly any in between. So this idea of gravity that he talks about seemed to coincide with the model that Mark McCutcheon had. And I don't know if we did this before. Maybe we can do it just real quick and then play the Emerald Tablet 2 so we can get on to 3. Sure. But he describes gravity as being, and I'll just tell you right now, he describes it as an atomic expansion rate that turns out to be the same force that we assign to little g, which is 9.8 meters per second squared. And we call it an accelerated force. So what he's saying is, if all matter is expanding at the same rate, this accelerated force of expansion, then relative to everything else you're looking at, if all matter is expanding and you're expanding, you wouldn't be able to detect the difference. That's the first premise. Okay, you with me?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, so then he says, now consider that if that's true, consider yourself a little speck. I like to call it a beach ball, something that people can visualize it expanding. Okay? And then on top of that beach ball is a very large ball, a rubber ball, that can be blown up, and they're both expanding at the same rate, right? And that big one is the Earth. And the little beach ball is you, standing on the Earth. Okay, so imagine it straight up and down, on top, stacked on the beach ball like a rock, so it's not going to fall off, or it's stabilized in some way, without adding more pressure. Well, what happens when the two balls are inflated at the same rate? What does the little ball feel relative to the big ball? Primarily, because it's a much bigger geometry. Mm-hmm. The little ball is going to get pushed up, right? At some expansion rate, almost completely experiencing the expansion rate of the bigger one as a pressure, because they're touching. You understand what I'm saying? Oh, so yeah. So it's the same experience as you going up in an elevator really quickly. You feel like you're being pushed down, and you experience that as a false sense of a G force, right? Relative to this vertical shaft or this vertical elevator that's going up. Well, it's exactly the same analogy to a large beach ball that's being blown up, the small one being pushed up like you in the elevator, and you feel the force downward of this expanding geometry of this planet that you're on. That's his theory, okay? Well, we know all matter is expanding, even light that we can measure through this red shift, if you will, the aging of light and these measurements they do. So most scientists believe that all matter is expanding. And so based on that, his theory to me made more sense than the tetherball theory from Isaac Newton, because you go just beyond the geosynchronous orbit of the Earth, and there is no gravity. You're floating around in free space. So what happened? Well, now you're outside the pressure band place where this expanding matter is expanding into space-time, warping it in some pressure envelope around it, spherical pressure envelope, which right at the edge, there's a place where you either fall to the earth or you fall out to space. And if you put a satellite right there, it'll just hover there, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what we do. So I think McCutcheon's theory explains this concept of gravity better than an attractive force between bodies, like on a tetherball pole. Okay, I don't believe that theory is accurate from Newton. So it's pretty radical. But when you read this book and as a scientist, really think about the physics from mechanics, especially, you'll have a hard time disagreeing with what he's saying. At least I did.
Sure. Well, if you're okay with that, Gerald, I'm going to play out Emerald Tablet number 2 to finish off the first half of the show, and we'll go to break. And
I think that's perfect.
And we'll reconvene after the break, Gerald, for the Emerald Tablet Part 3. So let me play this clip, Gerald, for the audience so they can get an idea of exactly what we've been talking about.
Okay, perfect, buddy. I'll talk to you after the break.
Tablet 2, The Halls of Amenti. According to Thoth, mankind was observed to be enslaved, and an intervention plan was hatched, causing 32 of the Anunnaki, benevolent observers, to intercede on our behalf. According to the tablet, their higher dimensional energy was used to manifest in a container body here on Earth, plotting to free the enslaved primitive workers caught up in the toils of the holographic simulator. During their mission, it appears that significant guarded underground structures were carved deep within the Earth, established as their residences away from their primitive workers. Within the underground chamber, Thoth said he placed a frequency emanating crystal to drive back the one installed by the Dark Ones. This is the basis for the Flower of Life symbol written about by Drunvalo Melchizedek, whose emitted rays bathe the 32 children of light living therein. The energy appears to renew their manifested bodies. How interesting. Additionally, the masters living underground have the ability to astral project out of their bodies to have encounters with mankind. Specifically, they can occupy the primitive worker containers in order to teach and guide them in their evolutionary spiritual paths. It is claimed who grow out of darkness are the ones they seek to help, guiding them by wisdom and knowledge to become a master of life, able to dwell with the infinite helping agents in their radiant underground rejuvenation hall. An additional 7 lords sharing their mission, hailing from the space-time above, are described seated within the Flower of Life radiating device in the same hall. A final cast of 9 additional beings are also presented to assist in Thoth's mission. He affiliates them with planetary cycles, probably similar to the Satya Yuga and Kali Yuga time-tracking mechanisms. The lead agent owns the cycle appointed over cycle account managers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. These entities, a total of 7, coincide with the human quantized consciousness levels described as chakras. They are the consciousness cops that judge and weigh the spiritual readiness of the seeker before permitting progression to the next nerve ganglia or chakra. Thoth expounds on his ascendancy path to meet the master, at which time he specifies the work he wants to do as an infinite being, able to come and go as he pleases, freed from the halls of Amenti, renewing his life force in the Flower of Life renewal chamber at will. Let me be a teacher of men, leading them to the light. I am thankful for his decision not to abandon the primitive workers who have toiled and suffered greatly in darkness. Deep in the earth's heart lie the halls of Amenti, far neath the islands of sunken Atlantis, halls of the dead and halls of the living, bathed in the fire in the infinite all. Far in a pastime lost in the space-time, the children of light look down on the world, seeing the children of men in their bondage, bound by the force that came from beyond. Knew they that only by freedom from bondage could man ever rise from the earth to the sun. Down they descended and created bodies, taking the semblance of men as their own. The masters of everything said after their forming, "We are they who were formed from the space dust, partaking of life from the infinite all, living in the world as children of men, like and yet unlike the children of men. Then for a dwelling place far neath the earth's crust, blasted great spaces they by their power, spaces apart from the children of men. Surrounded them by forces and power, shielded from harm they the dead. Side by side then placed they their other spaces, filled them with life and with light from above. Builded they then the halls of Amenti, that they might dwell eternally there, living with life to eternity's end. 32 were there of the children, sons of light, who had come among men, seeking to free from the bondage of darkness those who were bound by the force from beyond. Deep in the halls of life grew a flower, flaming, expanding, driving backward the night. Placed in the center a ray of great potence, life-giving, light-giving, fifth power all who came near it. Placed they around it thrones 32, places for each of the children of light, placed so that they were bathed in the radiance, filled with the life from the eternal light. There time after time placed they their first created bodies, so that they might be filled with the spirit of life. 100 years out of each 1,000 must the life-giving light flame forth on their bodies, quickening, awakening the spirit of life. There in the circle from eon to eon sit the great masters, living a life not known among men. There in the halls of life they lie sleeping, free flows their soul through the bodies of men. Time after time where their body lies sleeping, incarnate they in the bodies of men, teaching and guiding onward and upward, out of the darkness into the light. There in the hall of life, filled with their wisdom, known not to the races of man, living forever neath the cold fire of life, sit the children of light. Times there are when they awaken, come from the depths to be lights among men, infinite they among finite men. He who by progress has grown from the darkness, lifted himself from the night into light. Free is he made of the halls of Amente, free of the flower of the light of life. Guided he then by wisdom and knowledge, passes from men to the master of life. There he may dwell as one with the masters, free from the bonds of the darkness of night. Seated within the flower of radiance sit 7 lords from the space-times above us, helping and guiding through the infinite wisdom the pathway through time of the children of men. Mighty and strange they veiled with their power, silent, all-knowing, drawing the life force, different yet one with the children of men, aye, different and yet one with the children of light. Custodians and watchers of the force of man's bondage, ready to loose when the light has been reached. First and most mighty sits the veiled presence, Lord of lords, the infinite 9, over the other from each the lords of the cycles. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, each with his mission, each with his powers, guiding, directing the destiny of man. There sit they, mighty and potent, free of all time and space. Not of this world they yet akin to it, elder brothers they, of the children of men. Judging and weighing they but with their wisdom, watching the progress of light among men. There before them was I led by the dweller, watched him blend with one from above. Then he came forth a voice saying, Great art thou, Thoth, among children of men. Free henceforth of the halls of Amente, master of life among children of men. Taste not death, except as thou will it, drink thou of life to eternity's end. Henceforth forever is life thine for the taking. Henceforth is death at the call of thy hand. Dwell here or leave here when thou dost desire it. Free as Amente to the Son of Man. Take thou up life in what form thou desireth, child of the light that has grown among men. Choose thou thy work, for all should must labor, never be free from the pathway of light. One step thou hast gained on the long pathway upward. Infinite now is the mountain of light. Each step thou takest but heightens the mountain. All of thy progress but lengthens the goal. Approach ye ever the infinite wisdom. Ever before ye recedes the goal. Free are ye made now of the halls of Amente, to walk hand in hand with the lords of the world, one in one purpose, working together, bring of light to the children of men. Then from his throne came one of the masters, taking my hand and leading me onward through the halls of the deep hidden land. Led me through the halls of Amente, showing the mysteries that are known not to man. Through the dark passage down he led me, into the hall where sit the dark death. Vast as space lay the great hall before me, walled by darkness but yet filled with light. Before me arose a great throne of darkness, veiled on it sat a figure of night. Darker than darkness sat the great figure, dark with a darkness not of the night. Before it then paused the Master, speaking, the word that brings about life, saying, O Master of darkness, guide of the way from life unto life, before thee I bring a son of the morning. Touch him not ever with the power of night. Call not his flame to the darkness of night. Know him and see him, one of our brothers, lifted from darkness into the light. Release thou his frame from its bondage. Free let it flame through the darkness of night. Raised then the hand of the figure. Forth came a flame that grew clear and bright. Rolled back swiftly the curtain of darkness. Unveiled the hall from the darkness of night. Then grew in the great space before me flame after flame from the veil of the night. Uncounted millions leaped they before me, some flaming forth as flowers of fire. Others there were that shed a dim radiance, flowing but faintly from out of the night. Some there were that faded swiftly, others that grew from a small spark of light, each surrounded by its dim veil of darkness, yet flaming with light that could never be quenched. Coming and going like fireflies in springtime, filled they with space, with light and with life. Then spoke a voice mighty and solemn, saying, These are the lights that are souls among men, growing and fading, existing forever, changing yet living through life into death. When they have bloomed into flower, reached the zenith of growth in their life, swiftly then send I my veil of darkness, shrouding and changing to new forms of life, steadily upward through the ages growing, expanding into yet another flame, lighting the darkness with yet greater power, quenched yet unquenched by the veil of the night. So grows the soul of man ever upward, quenched yet unquenched by the darkness of night. I, death, come, and yet I remain not, for life eternal exists in the all. Only an obstacle, I in the pathway, quick to be conquered by the infinite light. Awaken, O flame that burn ever inward, flame forth and conquer the veil of the night. Then in the midst of the flames, in the darkness, grew there one that drove forth the night, flaming, expanding, ever brighter, until at last was nothing but light. Then spoke my guide, the voice of the Master, See your own soul as it grows in the light, free now forever from the Lord of the night. Forward he led me through many great spaces, filled with the mysteries of the children of light, mysteries that man may never yet know of until he too is a son of the light. Backward then he led me into the light of the hall of the light. Knelt I then before the great masters, lords of all from the cycles above. Spoke he then with words of great power, saying, Thou hast made free of the halls of Amenti. Choose thou thy work among the children of men. Then spoke I, O great master, let me be a teacher of men, leading them onward and upward until they, too, are lights among men, freed from the veil of the night that surrounds them, flaming with light that shall shine among men. Spoke to me then the voice, Go as yet will, so be it decreed. Master are ye of your destiny, free to take or reject it at will. Take ye the power, take ye the wisdom, shine as a light among the children of men. Upward then led me the dweller, dwelt I again among the children of men, teaching and showing some of my wisdom, son of the light, a fire among men. Now I tread the path downward, seeking the light in the darkness of night. Hold ye and keep ye, preserve my record, guide shall it be to the children of men.
Into it, I mean, let's talk about avatars, Gerald, because this is kind of what we're going to focus on a bit today. Everyone's familiar with the Avatar movie. I mean, I actually had Michael Cremo on the show a long time ago, and he had mentioned the analogy of the Avatar. He's coming from the Krishna perspective, of course, and ascension, but he used the Avatar analogy that is so close to the truth we just don't even realize it. We're being given this in the movies and we don't even realize it, how close to the truth this is. You feel the same, Gerald?
Well,
you feel the same that Avatar movie is just right on par with what's possible?
Well, there's been a couple of them. I think the one that connects with me even more is the Matrix movie, how the people are used as avatars in there. Mm-hmm. And I think it predates the movie Avatar by quite a bit. And speaking of dating of the term, the fact that the term avatar shows up in the Emerald Tablets and assuming that they're as old as he says they are. And we talked about that. They were 50,000 years old when he left the Atlantis to go to the land of Cam, or Egypt. So using that term way back, in time is an amazing concept, and busting the holographic simulator wide open.
Oh, sure. We're going to focus on tablets 2 and 3 today, and we'll play these at the end of our segments as well, so that people can get familiar with actually what we're talking about. But yeah, the Matrix, Gerald, I actually covered that on a show last week before I was traveling. From cinema symbolism, actually, was what we were focusing on, and all the symbolism that's incorporated into that movie. It's mind-blowing when you analyze it.
I actually, watching it recently, I'd seen it a long time ago, and I just watched it again with Krista recently, and the idea of avatars. Now you compare the way that the avatars, where the protagonist had to use a telephone line to go back and forth from this dimensional reality, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas these agents could do it at will with any body they wanted. Did you notice that? Mm-hmm. They could take over the helicopter pilot. They could take over the bum that was in the alleyway. Mm-hmm. So really, the Avatar kind of capabilities that Thoth talks about in the second tablet is more like what the agents were doing. So at the beginning, he talks about that they were observing mankind in this tablet and realizing how enslaved they were. And we talk about the method of enslavement, and he talks about the enslavement force coming from beyond. And that, I believe, is the same false Merkaba field that Drunvalo talked about, that was holding everybody in a false state of illusion. Okay? Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden they're talking, Thoth is introducing the idea of these, partners that are going to come with him, these agents, if you will, of light that are going to assist him. And he says there's 32 of them. And interestingly enough, when you include him in that, you end up with 33. Well, that's a pretty astounding Masonic number that you see on the temple. It's their highest degree, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I also noticed that in Atlantis they had their twin pillars that we talked about earlier, built out of orichalcum, that were decorating Poseidon's temple, because that was Poseidon's kingdom, right?
Sure.
And we knew that Thoth was, or Ningshita Thoth was Enki's son, so keeping that in mind, when he refers to his father as various names, it's interesting how he keeps this Chinese wall between him and who his dad really is. I'm not sure why. Anyway, the point is, right in the beginning of the tablet, they introduced the idea of an avatar, because they describe their capabilities of being able to be in the halls of Amente. They renew their original body, but from there, they can travel, occupy the bodies of seekers, in essence. Those that are on a path to try to wake up out of darkness is how they describe it later. And they influence them to find the path that leads to the full activation of their light body, so they can be one of them. Ultimately, that's what they're doing. Okay, this is what they were doing in the mystery schools. Okay, so here they are talking about all 32 of them having a particular seat, a permanent seat in the halls of Amente, where they're renewing their bodies just like Thoth is. And it's interesting because this flower of life symbol is the key to them renewing their life energy that's related to their chakras. So I sent you a document to show the flower of life.
Oh yeah.
And for those who don't know it, it was a symbol that Drunvalo got turned on to from a photograph he had taken in Egypt, and then they found it in other places in the world. Started connecting the dots to who the symbol came from. It turned out to be from Thoth. And he describes
5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, or beyond, and it's timeless now. It's the same information. It doesn't go out of date. There is no sell-by date on this information, and I think that's the most important stuff to mention. So, without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi, Gerald. Very welcome back to the show.
Hey, my Irish brother James. It's always good to be back, and like you, I go back and listen to the shows just to get back on the same sheet of music where we left off, and it does require more work, but I think because of us doing that, it's having the effect that we both wanted.
Yeah, and like I say, Gerald, whether you read the book or listen to the audiobook or you listen to the shows, there's so much information in there. You couldn't possibly take it all in at once anyway. And to take it in again, Gerald, you get a different level or a different layer. There's just so much in there. I mean, we're talking some heavy subjects.
Just prepping for this show, I picked up a couple things that I really didn't comment on in the book that just filled in another layer for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whether you're talking about monuments or whether you're talking about civilizations or whether you're talking about the reasons why, whether being genetically altered or spiritual ascension or lost knowledge, I mean, it's all in here, Gerald, and it's all there and it's all tangible. But you're going to have an intelligent mind to get through some of this material. And that's what I love what we're doing, Gerald. We're doing it in a productive, intelligent manner and a good dialogue too. So I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to talk more on the Emerald Tablets. We're going to get into some of this stuff, Gerald. Let's launch. This is your faithful host, James, and I'm delighted to have my returning guest in the series of podcasts we are doing, Mr. Gerald R. Clark. And of course, you can check out Gerald's website, geraldclark77.com, to follow today's author. Don't forget to check out his blog while you're there. Some really interesting articles on what we're going to talk about today, and regularly updated as well. Gerald is a minefield of information and knowledge and what the subject matter we're going to talk about today. Of course, we are talking about the Anunnaki and the legacy that's been left to us by them. Gerald's got 2 books, The Anunnaki of Nibiru, Mankind's Forgotten, Creators, Enslavers, Destroyers of the New World Order, and of course there is 7th Planet, Mercury Rising. That's his latest book. And it's a lot of what we're focusing on in these series of podcasts. Of course, we're getting much more into the book and the background information too. And it's, for me, I listen to the shows just before I do the next one because I have to, and it's great for me because the benefit is that this information is timeless. This material is timeless. It's been timeless since it was given to us.